This is not a video about quitting your job tomorrow. Most advice in the side hustle space is built on a high-speed fantasy. The idea that you can replace a decade of professional salary with 3 weeks of passive effort. That narrative isn't just misleading. It's a strategic error that leads to burnout and abandoned projects. If you are a full-time employee with limited hours and real financial responsibilities, you don't need more hustle. You need leverage. This is about building income streams that function as insurance policies before you actually need them. But here is the problem most people run into before they even start. They choose the wrong tier. They pick the hustle that demands the most time for the least long-term upside. And then they wonder why, 6 months later, they're exhausted and no closer to anything resembling financial independence. Today, we're decoding the 3-tier income model, the realistic time-to-income windows, the hidden costs, and why your existing professional skills are likely your most undervalued asset right now. Before we look at the model, we have to acknowledge your actual starting conditions. You have a full-time job. You have perhaps 2 hours on a weekday evening and a handful of hours on weekends. You have decision fatigue from 8 hours of work before you even open your laptop at home. Most content in this space ignores that entirely. It tells you to just work harder, as if effort alone is the variable that was missing. But when energy is limited, your choices have to be more precise. You don't need more time. You need better leverage choices. Because if you are trading 1 hour of exhaustion for $20 of gig work, you are not building a business. You are just exhausted with extra steps. Income grows where leverage compounds. That principle is what separates a side hustle that scales from one that simply adds strain. To navigate this properly, you need to understand where you sit on the leverage map. There are 3 tiers and they are not interchangeable. Tier 1 is quick cash. This is the entry layer. Basic freelance tasks, gig economy roles, simple reselling, task-based platforms. The setup is near zero. The skill requirement is generalist. Income can arrive within days or weeks, which makes it the most accessible starting point for most people. That's the upside. Here's the ceiling. Tier 1 income scales directly with your hours. You stop working. Income stops. Well, the platforms set the rates, not you. Competition is high precisely because the barrier to entry is low. You are competing on price with the entire world, and because the work is largely undifferentiated, there is very little compounding effect. Every week starts from zero. Tier 1 is useful for one thing above all else. It proves that the internet can send you money. That proof of concept matters psychologically, but treated as a long-term strategy, it plateaus quickly and costs more in energy than most people account for. The trap most people fall into is seeing a few $100s come in and doubling down on the effort without ever increasing the leverage. They stay in Tier 1 until the exhaustion outweighs the income. That's not a hustle failure. That's a structural failure. Tier 2 is skill-based income. This is where a specific professional competency, writing, design, development, project management, marketing, financial analysis, video production becomes a billable service. You're no longer just a worker. You're a solver. You charge for outcomes, not just hours. Setup is moderate. You need a clear offer and some form of demonstrated capability, a portfolio, case studies, or a track record from your day job that translates into credibility. Time to consistent income is typically 1 to 3 months, sometimes faster depending on your network and how specific your positioning is. The key distinction from Tier 1 is that your leverage increases over time. As your expertise sharpens and your reputation builds, your rates can rise without a proportional increase in hours. Most platforms that reduce setup friction or streamline client acquisition become useful here, not because they generate income on their own, but because they remove the administrative friction that slows early momentum. Tools at this tier are execution multipliers, nothing more. Tier 3 is asset and platform leverage. This is where effort converts into assets rather than immediate income. Content channels, digital products, email audiences, online courses, automated systems, licensing arrangements, anything that can generate returns beyond the hours you directly invest. The setup is significant. The skill requirement compounds over time, layering product, marketing, and distribution knowledge simultaneously. Income is delayed, often by 6 months, sometimes by 12 or more. The ceiling, however, is structurally different from the first two tiers. Work completed today can continue generating returns a year from now without additional input. This is what people mean when they say passive income. But that term is a misnomer. It is more accurately delayed income. You are doing the work today to get paid in 2 or 3 years. The feedback loop is long, and most people underestimate how long before they start. Tier 3 is not a shortcut. It is a different category of work with a different category of upside. Website builders, email marketing systems, automation tools. These become genuinely relevant at this stage, not because they do the work for you, but because they help manage scale once the asset is already producing results. Here is the insight most people miss until they're too deep into the wrong path. The highest paying tier is not where you should start, but it is where you must eventually aim. If you begin at Tier 3 with no audience and no cash flow, you will likely quit sometime around month 4 having made almost nothing. If you stay in Tier 1 indefinitely, the exhaustion will eventually outpace the income. Neither outcome is a hustle problem. Both are sequencing problems. The strategic path is a progression. Use Tier 1 to validate that you can sell and generate cash flow. Move into Tier 2 to build a specialized reputation and expand your income without proportionally expanding your hours. Then use the stability and surplus from Tier 2 to begin funding Tier 3 assets, buying back time through tools, automation, or delegation so the asset can be built without destroying the rest of your life. And that sequence respects both your current constraints and your long-term capacity. Skipping steps doesn't accelerate the outcome. It usually just delays it with more damage. There are real friction points in this space that rarely get discussed honestly. Time fatigue is the first. Managing a second income stream after a full working day is genuinely sustainable for some people and genuinely damaging for others. That is not a motivation problem. It is an energy management reality that varies by person, role, and life stage. Platform dependency is the second. If your entire side income relies on a single platform's algorithm or policy decisions, you do not have a business. You have a second employer who can restructure your income without notice or severance. The income ceiling is the third. Low leverage work traps people in income ceilings. If the only way to earn more is to sleep less, the model is broken regardless of how hard you work within it. Most people don't fail because the hustle doesn't work. They fail because they never transition out of low leverage work. They stay in the quick cash lane long past the point where it was strategically useful and mistake sustained effort for forward progress. How do you decide where to start? It comes down to 4 variables. Your existing skill base. If you have a competency that is marketable, Tier 2 is more accessible than most people assume, often within weeks of properly packaging what you already know. Your financial pressure. If cash flow is urgent, Tier 1 provides the fastest return. If you have some runway, you can move directly toward Tier 2 without the detour, or your available time. A reliable 2 hours per evening can build meaningful Tier 2 momentum over a few months. More than that opens up parallel Tier 3. Experimentation, your long-term direction. If independence is the goal, Tier 3 is eventually necessary, but it does not have to be, and probably should not be, the first step. The cleanest path for most working professionals? Use Tier 1 to generate early cash flow if needed. Use that foundation to build Tier 2 skill income, and begin Tier 3 only once. Tier 2 is producing consistent returns, and you have the stability to absorb a long feedback loop. Your employment provides the floor. It covers housing, food, and baseline financial stability, which means you can take asymmetric risks in your side hustle that would otherwise be unaffordable. You can spend 6 months building a Tier 3 asset precisely because your survival isn't dependent on it succeeding in month 2. That's not a weakness in your position. That is a structural advantage most people with pure entrepreneurial pressure don't have. Stability first, expansion second. That sequence is not timid. It is precise. The transition from employee to entrepreneur is not a jump. It is a deliberate evolution of leverage. Skills compound. Every project should teach you something that makes the next project more efficient, better positioned, or higher value. Systems scale. The goal is always to move toward assets that don't require your physical presence to continue functioning. Don't look for the highest earning hustle in the room. Look for the one that fits your current constraints and offers a clear path to higher leverage from where you actually stand. Whether that means using a freelance platform to land your first client this week or using automation tools to reclaim your Saturday mornings 6 months from now. The goal is the same. Build a system that eventually outgrows your individual effort. Income follows leverage, not urgency. Build the foundation now. Expansion follows from there.